यार ये जिन्ना को तो कुछ पता ही नहीं था यार, ये देखो क्या हो रहा है यार, इंडिया इतना तेज ग्रो कर गया यार, चलो यार उनसे दोस्ती कर लेते हैं यार. The only reason I'm sitting here is because Pakistan exists. There was no greater ambassador and champion for Hindu-Muslim unity in history than Muhammad Ali Jinnah.
मिसाल के तौर पे बंदा कहता है कि अच्छा यार इस्टेब्लिशमेंट ने आपको पढ़ाया ऐसे है ताकि आप पता नहीं पाक फौज से प्यार करें.
ये जो अंकल येल कर रही है पाकिस्तानी अशराफिया, यार प्लीज दोस्ती कर लो, प्लीज ट्रेड कर लेते हैं, ये दिस इज कमिंग आउट ऑफ द सेम प्लेस वेयर everything else is coming out of the Pakistani elite. And the dominant party in the Pakistani elite is the military leadership, but it's not alone. If you're just flapping about your arms and saying, please trade kar lo, please IMF paise de do, UN paise de do, ye paise. Like, okay, but what's your plan? Your elite doesn't have a plan.
Assalamu alaikum everyone and welcome to another episode of How Does It Work, a podcast by Pro Pakistani. We are very, very excited for our guest today. He's a public policy analyst, a columnist, a journalist, a writer, many things. Mosharraf Zaidi saab, firstly, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really excited for this one.
I appreciate being here, and you guys are doing an amazing job.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. Acha, so we've been talking about a lot of things off air, and I want to sort of try to get straight into those things. मैं आपकी Pakistan Pivot पे I think podcast देख रहा था, जिसमें you said that we should all be crying on our knees for Jinnah. अब मैं थोड़ा सा we've been trying to explore these topics, as I told you before, layman trying to understand कि यार क्या है हमारी history. And we've had multiple guests. I think Dr. Ishaq Ahmed is someone, maybe you know him. He was mentioning that Jinnah had no plan for Pakistan and it was just a sort of a man just, on a mission and bas tukke se jo ho gaya wo ho gaya. So I'm obviously paraphrasing here. That's not what he said, but, generally theme aisi thi. Why should we be crying on our knees for Jinnah?
Honestly speaking, if I'm asking a 23-year-old Pakistani to cry for Jinnah, I think I'm asking for too much. So this is a reflection that I've had, and these are reflections you constantly try and go back to think about what you've said and what your positions are. I want to spend a lot of time praying for Quaid-e-Azam. I feel like I owe him every notion of freedom that I enjoy because of Jinnah. And that freedom has enabled me to be honored by, for example, being invited to have this conversation. The only reason I'm sitting here is because Pakistan exists. There's no other reason. Now, my story is very different from the story of a 23-year-old Baloch sister, जिसके भाई को वो पूछती फिर रही है कि मेरा भाई कहाँ है. So, if I ask her to feel about Jinnah the way I feel about Jinnah, whose grandparents came to Pakistan from India, one in 1947, one in 1970, it's a totally different deal. Plus, I was born and raised outside Pakistan. So even there, I had this whole Pakistan Zameen thing kind of naturally. When you're far away, you develop this weird, hypersensitive, hyper-nationalistic sort of, appetite for your country. So I understand that this is really for me, and it isn't for everyone. But most people that'll watch this or listen to this are not my Baloch sister, whose brother, whose whereabouts we don't know. Most people are like you.
Yeah.
And if you forgive me for saying, you are just as privileged to be of Pakistan as I am. And all of the freedoms you have are also privileged by this thing called Pakistan. And this thing called Pakistan is a conception of a man who was the single greatest articulator and champion for Hindu-Muslim unity in history. There was no greater ambassador and champion for Hindu-Muslim unity in history than Muhammad Ali Jinnah. So what was that journey that led him from that point to becoming Quaid-e-Azam and creating a separate homeland? Since then, a homeland that has been partitioned into two, right? So my language and my approach to Pakistan is I don't mind whatever label people want to put on it, but it is that Pakistan as a necessity for the Muslims of the subcontinent is unquestionable. That the partition of Pakistan took place in 1971, and that word should be exclusively used for 1971, December 16th, 1971, and for nothing else. That August 14th, 1947 was independence from British rule and potential for Muslim self-rule in South Asia because the inevitability of the bequeathment of the modern state to Mother India, from, let's call it Kandahar to Chittagong to Sri Lanka to whatever's on the other side, south of the Bay of Bengal. Ye pura jo ilaka tha, this whole region, inevitably was going to see majoritarianism, which was going to look and sound exactly like kill all Muslims, which is the dominant political lifeblood of India today.
And you mentioned, like what happened and what could have happened.
By the way, I didn't always see this.
So what made you see it? Like let's start with that first. So what makes you think, like when you were growing up, क्या आपको लगता है जिन्ना का क्या विजन था? क्या what was the dream for Pakistan? Because ये भी थोड़ी सी confusion रहती है ना. The liberals are like he wanted a certain kind of Pakistan and they point to certain speeches he made. The conservatives point to the fact that he wanted a Muslim state. तो मतलब जो आपको sort of radical Islam तो खैर नहीं होना चाहिए, लेकिन that Islam that you are seeing is what he wanted, or that's what should have happened, because we are, I think Israeli side, I think we're the only, that were made for a religion purpose. हमें as like the younger, no, I'm not that young, लेकिन the relatively,
you're younger than me, so yeah.
लेकिन जो relatively younger लोग हैं वो ये सोचते हैं कि यार अच्छा क्यों ना, मतलब what were we supposed to be? वो original vision क्या थी? Let's say कि हम कहते हैं यार आज से we want to work towards what Pakistan was first envisioned by Jinnah or by Iqbal, Sayyid. वो क्या था? वो क्या पाकिस्तान था?
That's a fantastic question, and I don't know if I have the answer. I have my answer, right? एक चीज तो बहुत वाज़ेह है कि the beauty and the genius of Jinnah is that so many different schools of thought and different kinds of Pakistanis can park their bus in the Jinnah parking lot. So like you said, a lot of, sort of what I call Jinnahist Pakistanis, जिसको आप liberal कह रहे हैं. I'm not sure I'm a liberal, although my liberal friends tell me I am. My liberal haters tell me I'm not. So I don't know what. Also, I'm also conservative. And there are many parts of my political views, my identity, that are conservative. Most of those are quite private. I'm conservative, maybe socially or, in my private life. But I think that Jinnah was so many different things to so many different people is actually a tribute to his genius. Because he wasn't building for 1948. He was building for 2247. That's when Pakistan is going to be, 200 years old, right? Like, I think that if we assume 300 years old, sorry, my math is, so that's one of the failures of Pakistan, that even people like me, the basic math is a challenge. So was it Jinnah's vision that we would have 26 million kids out of school? That's a serious question that if you don't like Jinnah, or you think, oh, yaar, ye kya mess chhod gaye, Baba. तो reasonably आप खुद सोचें कि क्या ये civil military relations, ये तालीम के हालात, ये social structure, ये औरतों के साथ रवैया, is that what the husband of Rati, the brother of Fatima, the founder and biggest champion of Hindu-Muslim unity, the guy that didn't take dictation from anyone, if the China, America, Saudi Arab, Iran, सबसे मार खाने वाला Pakistan, ये क्या वो Pakistan? Don't ask me, ask yourself. Could the founder have envisioned? Was it his dream to see this, what we have today? So the simple answer to the big picture question, Jinnah yes or no, is of course Jinnah yes. And this version of Pakistan, no. And is this version of Pakistan in any way reflective of Jinnah? No. So, I think that the fixation with Jinnah is just academic and intellectual. I don't think it has a real meaning. So, a friend of mine the other day, मैं WhatsApp पे कुछ लोगों से लड़ता हूँ. वो सिर्फ उन लोगों से मैं लड़ता हूँ जिनको मैं बहुत रेट करता हूँ. Because if I've given up on someone, but मैं लड़ता इसलिए हूँ because sometimes we get into these habits of like the very basic फौज बुरी है, इंडिया से दोस्ती करनी चाहिए, what's wrong with us, kind of not even black and white, just very generic and very like
polarizing.
I think आपकी generation में इसको mid कहते हैं. It's all just mid. It's like, what does that actually mean? So, Jinnah, you don't have to like him as much as I do. I think you should. And if I can convince you, I'd love to. Maybe after this podcast. Because a lot of these things people have very strong views on. So I'll go so far as to say, I'm not interested in convincing you about Jinnah or even convincing you about Zia's genius in foreign policy and Zia's utter destruction of domestic policy, right? Because that too is controversial. And who cares? But if you sit today and you say कि पाकिस्तान इस वजह से ऐसा है क्योंकि जिन्ना, क्योंकि ज़िया, क्योंकि even Mosharraf, I think we really have to just take a beat, step back and think, Zia got blown up in a plane crash in 1988. I'll bet you money you weren't born in 1988.
Yeah, I wasn't.
What are we doing? What are we talking about? I met a Bangladeshi friend. I went to Dhaka recently. I met this guy. And, he wanted to have this discussion. And he's like, do you apologize for 1971? And I said, look, man, I've published, I've written about the fact that Pakistan as a state needs to formally apologize for 1971. And it's not that it needs to apologize to Bangladesh alone. Pakistan needs to apologize to itself, to its own people. You've robbed Shayan and Mosharraf of the opportunity to learn Bengali at school, which is what we would have had a chance to do. Who knows how much richer our culture and heritage would have been? Who knows how much more amazing Coke Studio could have been? Who knows what kind of fish nihari we would be having? Chicken nihari to aap Punjabiyon ne impose kar di hai hamare upar. But imagine ke if the Bengalis were the majority,
it's more culture.
Right? How many more things could have happened? So forget about the big picture politics for a second. Look at what we were robbed of. So this country owes me an apology for Bangladesh. But do I owe someone an apology? Well, I wasn't fucking born in 1971. So how am I? Do you see the distinction? And so I don't need a kid that was born in 1997 or 91 to feel about Jinnah the way I do. And I don't even need the kid to feel about Imran Khan the way that maybe I do, because that is really fixing on the wrong question. And now I say Imran Khan because now it's fast forward.
Yeah, of course.
Imran Khan 71, Nawaz Sharif 74, Shahbaz Sharif 72, Ishaq Dar 74, Ehsan Iqbal 74. Do you see where this is going?
Yeah.
Khaja Asif 76.
Yeah. I think Hakan is the young one, if anything.
Right, exactly. Apna Shah Mahmood Qureshi is, I think, 71. These people are not going to decide your future. They're deciding your present a bit. I think somebody else is deciding your present. But actually, we have to have our own ideas about how this place should work. And even I'm double the age of the median Pakistani. I started with 23 because 23 is the median age of the Pakistani. So there's 130 million Pakistanis below the age of 23. There's 130 million women. That also means there's 65 million women below the age of 23. That means there's 65 million young girls in this country. 65 million. That's bigger than the UK.
It's crazy.
Right? So who cares? Jinnah. Does it matter what he wanted? Or Zia? Yes, he ruined domestic polity, maybe permanently. But now that is the DNA. And so for me to debate the DNA when actually what really matters is, okay, the DNA is what it is. We can like it or we can dislike it, but what are we doing with the body now? What am I doing with DNA? तो हो गया ना, लेकिन अब मेरे पास ये हाथ हैं, ये उंगलियां हैं, ये पाक फौज है, ये बाकी हुकूमत है, ये एक दूसरे से लड़ रहे हैं या एक दूसरे के साथ मिले हुए हैं, ये कोऑर्डिनेटेड हैं दिमाग के साथ, जो नज़र आ रहा है वो सिग्नल प्रोसेस होके जो ये चीज़ कर रही है वो उसके साथ मुमासलत है, मुताबिकत है, या जो प्रोसेस हो रहा है वो एक चीज़ है और जो ये कर रहा है वो दूसरी चीज़ है, और फिर जो ये कर रहा है वो दूसरी चीज़ है, और फिर इनको हम किस तरह से कन्वीन करें कि ये synchronize हों और harmonize करें. So those are the questions that I'm more interested in.
And अभी आपने बात की ना कि so the median age being 23 and generally अब एक issue ये भी आ रहा था, and we were discussing this off air as well, कि let's say मैं बचपन में मैंने पाक स्टडीज़ पढ़ी, बाकी बच्चों ने भी पढ़ी. इसको फिफ्थ जनरेशन वॉरफेयर भी कहते हैं. स्पोकन लॉट अबाउट दिस where we talk about कि अच्छा यार मीडिया बीइंग यूज्ड टू कन्विंस यू टू डू समथिंग. अच्छा, इसके बहुत सारे पहलू हैं. मतलब आप कह सकते हैं कि इंडिया फॉर एग्जांपल फाइटर निकालती है सम इंडियन मूवी एंड देन आई स्टार्ट टू थिंक यार वेट अ मिनट, डिड वी विन दैट, वी लूज दैट, डज समवन विन अ वॉर, डज दे लूज अ वॉर. फिर उसमें फिर मिसाल के तौर पे बंदा कहता है कि अच्छा यार इस्टेब्लिशमेंट ने आपको पढ़ाया ऐसे है ताकि आप पता नहीं पाक फौज से प्यार करें. फिर आपको लिबरल्स बताते हैं कि नहीं ऐसा. अब व्हाट्स happened is I don't know if this is fifth generation warfare. Being honest with you, hoga. There are stronger powers that be than me, obviously. The US is famed for their use of media and influence. लेकिन अब हम इस दुनिया में आना शुरू हो गए हैं where I feel like the younger Pakistani, younger than me, even my age, we're like यार अच्छा नहीं तो सच्चाई क्या है? What happened, right? So when we think of Bangladesh or when we think of India, for example, आपने अभी बताया कि Jinnah was a champion of Hindu-Muslim friendship. I don't know. Unity, बिल्कुल. अब
ये by the way पाक स्टडीज में है ये.
जी.
So like इसको deny नहीं कर
इसी पे मैं. So where does all of that go wrong, and then what do you do, right? अगर आप for example, the reason we've started calling so many guests about this stuff is because myself, right? I'm like यार अच्छा मैं किसी से बात करता हूँ मुझे एक डायरेक्शन में लेके जाता है, किसी से बात करता हूँ एक और डायरेक्शन में लाता है. एंड दिस इज ग्रेट बिकॉज इट सॉर्ट ऑफ ओपन्स योर माइंड टू ऑल सॉर्ट्स ऑफ पॉसिबिलिटीज. विद दैट बीइंग सेड, is some of this it's almost like the branding of Pakistan has become like younger people don't want to be Pakistani. They हमारे जो बेचारे including like my age and younger are like यार यहाँ पे है क्या, यहाँ पे कुछ नहीं है. ये बड़ा एक इशू आना शुरू, hopelessness आना शुरू होगी. And how does one turn that? I feel so. I have a nephew. He's 13 and दुबई में रहता है, पूरी ज़िंदगी दुबई में रहा है, never lived here. मुझे बड़ा दुख होता है. He's I think 1/4 Syrian. His grandfather was Syrian. He refuses to say he's Pakistani. हर समर हर विंटर इधर आता है, उर्दू बोलता है, सब कुछ जानता है, लेकिन it's almost a negative. Whereas when I look at like Indians, I had several friends in the UK who were from England, from India or from Bangladesh. They are so proud and they're so. How do we bring that back?
So there's a bunch of questions there.
Yeah.
I want to
to
answer that. No, it's fantastic. Ek to ye ke what you said broke my heart, but I get my heart broken every day, and Allah is the protector of hearts. When you said, young people don't want to be Pakistani, it broke my heart because that's I failed for what muqam and what waqar and what platform and what voice Alamia and this country have given me, for me to have forged a present or contributed to a present in which people don't want to be, is I failed. So that's and my generation has failed, and lots of other, like I'm not that important. Give made a failure, but I feel like I let younger people down, and I'm letting them down every day by
so am I, so is everyone
by that being a reality. So that's a real heartbreaker. That's one. Two, you asked about does anyone win a war, and this is this really cute kind of essentially broad neoliberal truism that's been around for a long time. But ask Vladimir Zelensky if anybody wins a war. Ask a Ukrainian mother who's sheltering her children while the Russians are bombing the shit out of her city. Ask her if anybody wins or loses a war. I'm deliberately not going where I really want to go because it'll ruin the conversation. But I would just say, take a good look at Gaza. If you want to, if आपके दिमाग में इब्हाम है कि कमजोरी और ऑक्यूपेशन और डोमिनेंस का नतीजा क्या निकलता है, जब एक पार्टी is completely dominant financially, from a capital perspective, from a technology perspective, from a military perspective, and from the freedom to act politically the way they want to. When you have that across the board, technology, politics, capital, and hardware, the natural state of the weaker party is to be dominated. That's what's happening in Gaza. October 7th, by the way, the way it happened, the whole thing. That's not how Palestinians want freedom. That's not what the average Palestinian never imagined that this was the path and the only path for them, what Hamas did. So there's no question, no reasonable human being is going to endorse what happened on the 7th of October. But what happened on 7th October has been happening every day since 1948 to the Palestinians. And what we're seeing now is the first time that all of it has been transmitted live. So I don't know, Shayan, about whether anybody wins a war or not. But I know what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Kashmir is real for those people. And I think it's rich. Enjoying the canopy of protection and freedom that we enjoy. And again, there are people that don't enjoy that freedom, right?
Yeah.
And I talked about our Baloch brothers and sisters.
Of course.
Even if they enjoy it, they don't feel like they enjoy it. And if they don't feel like they enjoy it, then they don't enjoy it, and we have to fix that.
Yeah.
So I right up front, that's something we have to acknowledge and be brave and be relentless about fixing. But that shouldn't convolute or confuse what it is that we're sitting on. The most valuable plot of land ever conceived, ever. For me, I don't need a young person to realize that, but I think it's important for young people, for you, for others, to think about carefully what we're postulating. क्या actual framework है क्या? जब हम कहते हैं यार ये क्या जंग लड़नी है और इंडिया से क्या लड़ाई है, ना करो लड़ाई, करो दोस्ती. जिन्ना साहब ने 25 साल अपनी जिंदगी के हिंदू मुस्लिम यूनिटी पे लगाए थे. उसके बाद वो इस कंक्लूजन पे पहुंचे थे. हम फिर भी बाज नहीं आए. पाकिस्तानियों का इंस्टिंक्टिव जो posture है towards India, instinctive, is normalization. That's not because we're peace-loving, by the way, or because Muslims are better than Hindus or any such nonsense. It's very simple. It's because we're smaller and we're weaker. So, of course, we're going to have a natural tendency towards wanting peace. Now, in most cases, after a certain period of time, what you see in a power differential is that the more powerful has an interest in managing the less powerful, except when the differential crosses a certain threshold. Now, I don't know what that threshold is, but I know it was crossed in Russia because they kept testing. There was Crimea, there was parts of South Ossetia. You're familiar with the history. Yeah. So it was 10, 12 years of testing the waters, seeing how much they had, building up their foreign exchange reserves, building up their economy, and then going in for the kill. In Israel, the buildup has been 60, 70 years long, right? And this so-called provocation of October 7th, right? And I say so-called specifically because if you pretend that October 7th happened in a vacuum, then that's false. That has to be challenged. But I also think that if we pretend that the genocide was not enabled by Hamas's attack, I think that's a fallacy that, you know, as a Muslim, as a human being, as somebody who's decidedly pro-Palestinian and anti-genocide, that reality also has to be processed. So when you take all of that and you stop and you take a step back, it's a simple question for Pakistanis. And it doesn't have anything to do with May 9th or with Imran Khan or with Nawaz Sharif or with civil military disequilibrium. Those are important issues and they need to be addressed in the right way, justly and fairly. But the broader spectrum of choice is, do you want to be dominated and destroyed? Or do you want to maintain that freedom, the kind that you have, that the average Afghan doesn't have, that somebody in Syria doesn't have, that somebody in Iraq doesn't have, that somebody in Kashmir doesn't have, that somebody in Palestine doesn't have, somebody in Ukraine today doesn't have? Do you want to be fighting for that, or do you want to maintain at least the baseline freedom and extend that freedom to everybody in this country that doesn't have it? Our fellow citizens that are Ahmadi do not enjoy the same freedoms that the average Pakistani does. Our sisters and brothers in Balochistan do not enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy in Rawalpindi or in Karachi or in Lahore. Poor Pakistanis don't enjoy the freedoms that you and I do. Women don't enjoy the freedoms that you and I do. And so we can acknowledge and resolve to fix all this, but to try and do that in a wider conversation about, यार ये जिन्ना को तो कुछ पता ही नहीं था यार, ये देखो क्या हो रहा है यार, इंडिया इतना तेज ग्रो कर गया यार, चलो यार उनसे दोस्ती कर लेते हैं यार. I mean, I literally feel like when I see important Pakistanis talk about trade with India, this is what I hear. I hear thoughtless, brainless, evidenceless kind of rushing towards something that doesn't exist. There is no hand of friendship in New Delhi.
Yes. And my question to you is going to be, I believe Ishaq Dar said that we should continue or begin seriously considering trade with India. अभी आपने एक बड़ी logical बात की कि जैसे बिजनेस है ना, बिजनेस में यू नेगोशिएट फ्रॉम अ पॉइंट ऑफ लेवरेज, राइट? एटलीस्ट ऑन इक्वल फुटिंग नेगोशिएट करो, वरना मुश्किल हो जाता है. करंटली इकोनॉमिक कंडीशन आपके सामने है, बुरी है, सब कुछ बुरा है रियली. इज दिस द टाइम टू, एंड व्हाई वुड दे एक्सटेंड एन ऑलिव ब्रांच? अच्छा, एंड फॉर माई ओन अंडरस्टैंडिंग, व्हाई आर वी so, we did another podcast on this as well with Mehtab Haider, where we were discussing कि ट्रेड अगर इंडिया के साथ होगी, एक तो वो क्यों करेंगे हमारे साथ, दूसरा हम अभी क्यों करना चाह रहे हैं. लाइक व्हाई इज सो अपेरेंटली द आइडिया इज कि यू हैव टू ट्रेड बिकॉज वी कांट गेट मोर IMF लोन्स. सो उसका मतलब ये है कि जी सबके साथ ट्रेड करना है, एंड स्टार्ट हम करेंगे सेंट्रल एशिया के साथ, एंड देन ईरान के प्रेसिडेंट भी आए हुए थे, एंड देन विल गो टू इंडिया और हमारी इंडिया से दोस्ती हो जाएगी और फ्री ट्रेड और बहुत सारी चीज़ शुरू हो जाएंगी. अच्छा, मुझे समझ नहीं आ रही है कि कंसिडरिंग ऑल्सो व्हाट्स गोइंग ऑन इन इंडिया राइट नाउ, why is that one a reality, and two, why is this the right time to negotiate with India for trade?
If there's a willing partner in India, there is no wrong time. If tomorrow there is verifiable evidence of an absence of hatred for Pakistan in the political elite of India and a willingness to engage in a fair conversation about trade, we should not spend a second thinking about it. So that's my position. My position is trade, cross-border movement, education, technology, business, banking, finance, open it all. Open it with a willing partner. But learn from your experiences with willing partners. What is the Pakistani experience of its trade relationship with China? Pakistan has an FTA with China. What is the balance of trade with China? What was the impact of Chinese imports into Pakistan, Chinese exports to Pakistan, on domestic production? What products and services that could have been built here didn't because we could buy them cheaper from China? And what effect did that have on the economy? What potential competitive advantages in Africa as an export market for Pakistan would we be giving up if, for example, we let the pharmaceutical sector in Pakistan get watered down and wiped out by the pharmaceutical sector in India? Does anybody have an answer to any of these questions? I want cheaper cars. I'd love to buy a Mahindra and Sons or a Tata vehicle, right? And their taxation regime and everything is cheaper. Like, I think it'd be like 1/5 the price to drive a nice Indian car. It'd be great for me. But what would the downstream impact of allowing, is it Mahindra and Mahindra? I think it's
not sure.
Whatever the company is, right? You allow those SUVs to come into this market. What will be the impact on domestic productivity? Now, a legitimate counter question might be, well, what will the impact of allowing all these Chinese manufacturers to be imported into Pakistan? And then there's a wider question about the automotive sector in Pakistan and what benefits and what costs Honda Atlas and Toyota Indus and Pak Suzuki had on auto manufacturing and parts manufacturing in Pakistan. Does anyone have a paper on that?
I'm not sure.
I am sure, because this is my job to know. No, we haven't done our homework on our own automotive sector. So when we sit down to negotiate with India on the automotive sector, we're going in blind. So a lot of the conversations that Pakistanis want to have with India, Pakistan is not prepared to have. But if we were prepared and we could identify what we're looking to get. So if we narrow it down, just pharmaceutical ले लो, automotive ले लो, these are two big ones. क्योंकि इन पे बात हो चुकी है पहले. ये बड़े आसान है क्योंकि आपकी actually, by the way, इस पे studies हुई हैं, लेकिन they're all 10 years old. 2011, 2012 was the last time we had serious working on this. I know this because I was in government at the time and we were talking to India at that time. Today, we're not prepared. But if we were prepared, it's not just having the data. It's also deciding what is our interest. So In the case of automotive, the policy objective of the government of Pakistan could be, we want cheaper cars for Pakistanis, period. All other considerations we can deal with. That's one policy objective. A second policy objective, a different one, would be, we want to build the automotive parts industry. We think that Pakistan has a competitive advantage, and for the next 50 years, automotive parts in Africa will all come from Pakistan. Automotive parts in all of Central Asia will all come from Pakistan. And this is why we need to open up to India, ताकि जब Indians अपनी गाड़ियां उधर बेचें तो automotive parts वो यहाँ से. So this is called value chain identification and figuring out where you're going to, you know all this because, you know, तू धंधा करता है, right? ये वाली study और ये वाली conversation नहीं हो रही.
अच्छा.
ये जो अंकल येल कर रही है पाकिस्तानी अशराफिया, यार प्लीज दोस्ती कर लो, प्लीज ट्रेड कर लेते हैं, ये दिस इज कमिंग आउट ऑफ द सेम प्लेस वेयर everything else is coming out of the Pakistani elite. And when I say the Pakistani, I want to be very clear. The dominant party in the Pakistani elite is the military leadership, but it's not alone. And it's a falsehood and a fallacy to pretend that the army chief or any member of the military is so powerful that they alone determine key aspects and elements of policy. So the Pakistan Administrative Service is the second most powerful entity, maybe the most powerful entity, one could make the argument, other than the military. And then there's Pakistani capitalists who invariably are ministers of commerce, whether caretaker or otherwise. Kabhi Razak Dawood hote hain, kabhi Gaur Ejaz sahab hote hain. I hope I'm not messing with any of your
No.
When I am, just cut me off.
No. Please, have a go.
You know, no. And by the way, so as a businessman myself, right, I would love to, you know, even Gaur Ejaz, as long as Gaur Ejaz isn't going around doing dramabazi on television about, you know, being a great Muslim and bringing Pakistan $100 billion in exports, which I know and you know was total bullshit the moment it exited his mouth. Stop lying to people. But otherwise, great businessman, potentially driver and builder of the economy. Every businessman is sacred in Pakistan, especially big businessmen. Unka capital ही इस मुल्क को आगे लेके जाएगा. So it's, you know, it's, now this is hard, and we talked about this off air, right? Okay, when you say one thing about, like when I say Pakistani Ashrafi or Pakistani lead or say something or Gaur Ejaz, it means I hate big business. No, I love big business. I even love Gaur Ejaz. As long as Gaur Ejaz is building the economy, creating jobs, investing capital, attracting FDI, sending out exports, he's great. He's the king. I bow to him. But if he comes and he starts messing around with Zia's narratives and trying to fool the army chief into believing that we're ever going to be at $100 billion export when we haven't crossed $28 billion ever, like why? What's the plan? And there is no plan. And so let's do trade with India, but let's be prepared. Let's know what we're trying to achieve. Is it cheaper cars, or is it downstream automotive parts, or is it what part of the value chain do we want to bring to Pakistan? And then the third part, which is the most important part, is there a willing partner on the other side? So wo aakhri wala sawal jo hai, that's where we fall down right now. But maybe tomorrow there will be a willing partner in India. At that time, I would still say don't go for it if you're ill prepared. If you're just flapping about your arms and saying, please trade kar lo, please IMF paise de do, UN paise de do, ye paise. Like, okay, but what's your plan? Your elite doesn't have a plan.
I want to say something before we continue on this topic. You were mentioning something off air where you were talking about building your business, and you said, I want to have the good bits of Mosharraf Zaidi without the bad bits, so that lives on and that business grows. And I think I really like your opinion, and I just wanted to point that out in the sense कि यार देखो, एक कोई विलन नहीं होता कहानी में, एक कोई हीरो नहीं होता. There isn't like establishment या elite में अच्छी भी चीज़ें हैं that drive the economy forward, बुरी भी चीज़ें हैं.
इसका best example पता है कौन है? Nobody has done something as dramatic in the private sector as Malik Riaz in the last 30 years.
Yeah. Definitely.
If you drive through Bahria town, it feels like you're in Dubai.
Yeah. It's amazing.
There's no DHA there. Fine, he might have had some help and he's got a bunch of generals working for him, but it's Malik Riaz that built that. Now, there's a part of what he's done that seems criminal. And I guess the courts have to figure out.
Innocent until proven guilty.
But he's also done this amazing thing. And so, do we hate him or do we like him? Now, I understand in the digital age that we need to feel either extreme hate or extreme love for everything. But I think that, you know, is good for monkeys, but bad for people. So people have to have sophisticated views about sophisticated, complicated things. Malik Riaz done some amazing, incredible, transformational things in terms of what our cities could look like. Actually, he should be our head of local government. If there's a limit to how much money he wants to make, I would, in the perfect world, he would be the guy that would devise your answer to local government, right? But of course, we never get that far in this country because we're just.
Do you think we don't get as far in the country? Sometimes I look at it and I always think, continuity is the biggest problem, right? So, होता क्या है कि जो पॉलिटिकल पार्टी आती है उसको कॉन्स्टेंटली एक सर्वाइवल मोड में रहती है एंड ऑल्सो द विंड्स चेंज डिपेंडिंग ऑन हुज in whatever part of the elite. That's the government, that's the establishment, misal ke taur pe whoever the chief of army staff is, or whoever the prime minister is. And then even in bureaucracy, right? So bureaucracy mein depends on the guy who's running whichever department, wo kya kar raha hai, kaise negotiate kar raha hai, kya acha ho raha hai, kya bura ho raha hai. Continuity ka issue hai, from what I can tell. And a lot of people say this, कि पाकिस्तान का सबसे बड़ा मसला ये है. अब we had Asad Umar on the podcast and he said कि charter of economy की कोई sense नहीं बनती क्योंकि economy itself or economic decisions are what makes a political party differentiate itself from each other. कि है ही ये politics है ही economic decisions and foreign policy
theory
decisions.
में पाकिस्तानी अशराफिया का मुकाबला नहीं है. Theoretically हम बहुत, he's 100% right. The trouble is that his government, when he was the finance minister, reflected zero difference in policy from the previous government, the caretaker, which reflected zero difference from the policy of the previous. 19-20 का फर्क था. डार साहब को डॉलर का कम रेट रखना पसंद था. That's the big distinction. शमशाद अख्तर आई 2018 वाले इलेक्शन से पहले, she blasted the rate. उससे पहले शाहिद खाकान और मिफ्ता इस्माइल ने जो है वो रेट जाने दिया. फिर उन्होंने आके और रेट जाने दिया. फिर उन्होंने आके रेट जाने दिया लेकिन कंप्लेन किया कि रेट तेज जा रहा है. फिर कहा कि IMF से डील नहीं करेंगे लेकिन इवेंचुअली IMF से डील की. राइट? मतलब the point is, I think he's 100% right. You can't have a charter of economy. And there was a time when I thought maybe that's the answer. Did I think that was the answer because Bajwa was saying that was the answer, or did I really think that was the answer? I'm still trying to answer that question for myself. Because there was a time, and I would say 2018, it was clear that the shots were going to be run in a certain way, especially after the election. And I thought, okay, agar Fauj ne faisla kar liya. Sorry, now I'm going sort of deep insider baseball in terms of how I was thinking, and I don't think I've talked about this publicly. 2018, you see this happen. The election was clearly manipulated. This guy was in charge, and he got rid of one prime minister. He brought in a new one. And it seemed not just that there was an equation at the top, but that throughout the military, there was real excitement. So the rank and file was excited. Now, we hadn't seen that excitement since the 90s with Nawaz Sharif. And actually, what we'd seen with Nawaz Sharif that was cultivated by the military was hatred for the Sharifs. And I want to repeat, that hatred did not come out of the blue. It was actively cultivated. It was harvested, cultivated, nurtured, grown, lab grown, whatever you want to call it, but it was inorganic. Uska natija ye hua ki this new prime minister, 2018, had a lot of support from the system. So my macro level calculation about the country was, well, finally, you have a civil military convergence at a crucial time for the country. This has to work.
Yeah.
That's
at least they're all on the same page, right?
Exactly.
That's half the problem.
Exactly. They're all on the same page, and there's a reasonable popularity that the leader enjoys. Frankly, beyond reasonable, it wasn't reflected as of the election.
Yes.
The election was skewed, but it wasn't so skewed that black became white.
Yeah.
There was shades. Now, when you fast forward to March 2022, the decision to remove Imran Khan was also not that wild a decision. The level of popularity of the government had plummeted. Khan Saab had not done anything extraordinary in terms of earning the favor of the people. People were broadly okay.
Yeah.
And then everything that happened, and I don't want to relive because frankly for me, for any Pakistani, it has to be traumatic, right? But we are where we are now, where the questions that are being answered are not the ones being asked. we're trying to fix the FBR by removing 25 people, notwithstanding कि वो ड्रामा जो है वो चेयरमैन करवा रहा है अपने करियर ग्रोथ के लिए, या वो वाकई जो है करप्ट थे सारे. और मैं कहता हूँ मुझे नहीं पता, and शायद the Prime Minister knows something we don't, and frankly, it's great that he has the courage to remove these people, except he hasn't removed them. They're OSD. I've seen this movie before. Who was the hero in the previous version? It was Imran Khan. And before that, it was Nawaz Sharif. And before that, it was Shaukat Aziz. And before that, it was Benazir Bhutto. And before that, it was Nawaz Sharif. Ye wali picture to bahut OSD logon ko lagana aur phir wapas. So it's not really change, but it's kind of change. Well, we've seen that before. But the bigger question is, in previous attempts, you've had at least a modicum of legitimacy and popularity. और जो मेरा इस हफ्ते वाला कॉलम है वो मैंने political legitimacy पे लिखा है. And the issue is not that this government is, so to speak, illegitimate. The issue is that it lacks the quantum of legitimacy that is required to make big changes. So when they talk about peace with India or normalization with India or trade with India, A, there's no hand of friendship being extended from India. B, we haven't done the preparation. But C, whether you do normalization with India or you make the other choice, there's a baseline number of citizens in Pakistan that are talk to the hand. They're not even listening. To me, I don't know what that quantum is, but it feels like it's a bigger quantum than I've experienced in my life. In my adult life.
I mean, I would feel the same. I don't know. I mean, there's no way, I don't know if there is a way to quantify that.
And I don't want to go for survey X or survey Y. वो अब इतना ज़्यादा partisan हो गया discourse क्या पता नहीं. लेकिन ये I can tell you my feeling. My feeling is that the number of Pakistanis, mostly young, that are saying मैंने बात ही नहीं करनी तुझसे. ये उनका approach हो गया. ये गलत ये सही इस पे जज करें कि ये कौन सी पार्टी और ये कौन से YouTube चैनल देखते हैं. And by the way, I have views on that. And they're not necessarily pro sort of these. But I can't escape the fact that these young people are Pakistani and they have more of a right about determining what direction this country takes than I do, because they're going to be alive longer on average. Like the 23-year-old Pakistani has 70 years, inshallah, maybe 80 years. With the advancement of science, maybe 100 years of life left. And at best, given, matlab main nihari jis tarah khata hu, I definitely don't have that long, right? Like, Allah khair kare.
But
so we owe ourselves a moment to step back and examine. Aap Shahbaz Sharif Prime Minister ho, Imran Khan Prime Minister, koi bhi Prime Minister ho, I think we're fast losing a generation. And I think there'll be a nominal bump in positivity. For example, if Khan Sahab came, assuming that all the noise is what it is and is at the volume that it seems like it is.
How much of it do you think is Khan Sahab and how much of it do you think is, sometimes I mean, I don't think this, I think it's a fact. I guess I can't prove it, but Khan Sahab's popularity in this particular election has less to do with Imran Khan, the politician, or Imran Khan's achievements, and more to do with just a hate for where we are and the establishment and elite that have brought us here. I think it's less voting for the man and more voting for who he's up against, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, there's no question that there is extreme levels of discontent with the way things are. And so Imran Khan is not a thing. Imran Khan has become an expression of a rejection of what is. People don't want to deal with what is being presented to them. So when no matter what comes out of this box, it's almost like there's a box and people have said मैंने इससे बात ही नहीं करनी. अब आप उस box में chocolate भी डाल के खोल के दोगे, वो कहेंगे यार ये chocolate नहीं है, ये chocolate हो भी मैंने नहीं खानी. It's literally it's at that level. Now, there's a way to overcome this. There's a way to overcome the manipulation of the election results on February 8th. And the way is to deliver. Yeah. And to do it fast. This is not a popular thing to say, because I'm clearly objectifying a norm. Not objectifying, I'm violating a norm.
Yeah.
Norm is कि जो process है उसकी fidelity को mess नहीं होना चाहिए. मैं कह रहा हूँ हो गया. और मैं कह रहा हूँ let's accept कि हो गया. Can we come out of this? Yes, there are places that don't have elections at all. What to say of a Form 45, Form 47 election? There's places that never have elections, where the people are actually excited about the future. अगर आपने उम्रा किया हो recently, so you go to Saudi Arabia, that country is abuzz with excitement.
Yes, I was there like 2 months ago. Insane.
You don't think those guys are good Muslims anymore? You don't think they love Gaza more than we do? You don't think, like, there's nothing about Saudi Arabia that's in any way better or worse than here, except that the top of the country, the Saudi elite, have a grand vision for what their country could be. And the top of the mountain in Pakistan has no vision for what the country could be. Now, I can tell you why that is in a very behuda, very unrefined way. MBS was 26 when he started writing Vision 2030. And he's not 35 yet. Pakistan's leaders are all above 57 years of age. वो 57 भी इसलिए हो जाता है क्योंकि वो आर्मी चीफ जो है वो 60 साल का नहीं हुआ हुआ. But the judges are all above 60 because they retired 65. So all the judges are above 60, all the politicians are above 70, all the generals are above 55. You can't build a country for 2047 with people who are not even going to be around in 2037.
But then,
whereas MBS is building a country for 2100 because he thinks he's going to be around legitimately for another 60, 70 years.
But then the people with power are not the people who are 27 or 31 or 35 or 40. They're the ruling elite are, whether they're big business or they're political or they're, let's say there's a जो अभी bureaucrat मैं उसको क्या कहूँ जिसने अभी CSS दिया है और जो लाहौर में academy होती है, I forget its name.
Civil Services Academy.
Civil Services Academy में अभी ट्रेनिंग कर रहे हैं जो कर रहा है उसको मैं क्या कहूँ, वो तो अभी मेरी मुझसे भी छोटा है.
आप उसको कुछ ना कहें because वो तो मजबूर है, just like जो मेजर या कप्तान है वो भी मजबूर है.
बिल्कुल वो तो अभी low ranked है.
और जो political worker है 27 साल का जो सिर्फ बेसिकली ट्वीट्स कर सकता है क्योंकि और उसको स्पेस नहीं है, तो वो भी मजबूर है. लेकिन ये तो फिर अशराफिया ने खुद फैसला करना है ना कि उनका मकसद क्या है. व्हाट इज देयर पर्पस? एंड दिस द हार्ट ऑफ एवरीथिंग दैट आई एम सेइंग, आई होप इट कनेक्ट्स, बट I'd like it to connect to a fundamental breakdown. We talked about what is wrong with us. If somebody was to frame this question to me, then I would tell you that there is no society in human history that has prospered with an elite whose ego and purpose is shrinking. The Pakistani elite has lost its sense of purpose. The reason why we started the discussion with Jinnah is because
the vision
there's an active attack on Jinnah. It's pervasive in every major stream of thought in this country. And it's not deliberate, but it is pervasive. It's pervasive because the people who would frame कि हम कहाँ जा रहे हैं are who they are. One guy wants to attack the military and he's in jail. The other guy is concerned only with his immediate family. The other guy is also concerned with his immediate family and close business associates. And the other guy is only concerned with his institution and its place in the society. As in, it has to stay on top.
Yeah.
So when you have that as the driving motivation and purpose of the 3, 4, 5 key elements of your elite, then you get what you have. You look at any successful country in recent years. So all the new G20 countries, Indonesia, Bangladesh to be, India is an easy one and a hard one because it's so much bigger, but Saudi Arabia, Turkey.
Yeah.
Right? None of these places are Guevaras of human rights. None of them have figured out how to treat women properly. None of them have equal opportunity for middle class and the children of the rich. They're all unequal and in many ways deeply flawed societies and states.
Yeah.
But there's a big picture. They all want to be the dominant powers. Not just regionally. Saudi Arabia wants to be a world power. Turkey wants to be a world power. Indonesia wants to be a world power. They actively pursue an image of themselves that doesn't exist today. when we talk about that, when I talk about Jinnah and his vision, and we haven't really talked about that, I was too busy being on the defensive about Jinnah, right? Explaining why I'm trying to justify why Pakistan exists. How do I get to the point where what Jinnah had really conceived? Why was he talking to Muhammad Asad, the father of Talal Asad? Muhammad Asad was born Leopold Weiss. He's one of the most important scholars of Islam over the last 150 years. I would say he's more important than Hassan al-Banna and Sayyid Qutb even. In many ways, he was more important for Pakistan. There is no center for Muhammad Asad studies in Pakistan because that entire generation essentially got wiped out. They were so busy trying to defend Pakistan from occupation and attack and penury that all of the people that should have built the DNA of a successful country at that time were too busy fighting the fire. We were fighting the fire for the reason that we have a big army. It's not the other way around. There's this entire strain of literature that talks about the oversized military, the overfed military, the military that, most countries have a military, Pakistan's military has a country. ये सारा narrative जो है ये constructed है. इसमें एक element of truth जो है वो तो obvious है. It's all actually quite rigorous research and I have a lot of respect for the people that have come to this view based on their study of the literature and history. But I also have an alternative reading of all this. Pakistan has an oversized military because it's a small country, lower riparian, weaker and poorer than the country next door to it, which is not a natural relationship. Pakistan is a breakaway state. This is something we don't like to say. Someone in my position maybe shouldn't even say, at least in the public domain. But the way that, and Indians won't talk about it in these terms, but it's always, since the beginning, been a breakaway republic. So the view in New Delhi about Pakistan is exactly the same view as what Putin and his, underlings have in Moscow vis-a-vis Ukraine. It's literally, when I talk to Western diplomats, I tell them, stop telling Pakistan not to spend money on national security. Tell them to stop spending money on plots and bullshit. But national security is vital to Pakistan's existence. Without national security, Pakistan doesn't exist. And so when you're fighting for your life, and in 1971, half the country, got swallowed up. Now, whose fault was it? 100% it was ours. But who made it happen? Who enabled it? India. Indian political parties compete with each other for credit for breaking up Pakistan during their election cycles. So you don't have to listen to me. Listen to the Indians that we love so much that we want to be friends with so bad. Suno unki baatein. They're telling you what they are and how they feel. That's not all Indian people. Even the Indian people that feel strongly about BJP and that hate Muslims, that's their elite has taken a few decisions about the direction they want to go in. It's not irreversible. India can be cured of its hatred for Muslims and for Pakistan. But that disease or cure will have no effect on the effectiveness and the beauty and the glory of Pakistan. For that, trade with India is not going to solve it. Being friends with the Taliban or hating the Taliban is not going to solve it. Being extremist Muslim or liberal Muslim is not going to solve it. Being pro-Saudi or being pro-Iran is not going to solve it. Close to America, close to China, these are not the solutions. The solution is to be functional, to know what the hell it is we're trying to achieve and to have a grand vision for where this country should be. So the country was founded to be the leader of the Muslim world, without question. It was founded to be a safe haven for weak people, not only for Muslims. So it is completely ass backwards that minorities in this country feel unsafe. Jinnah's visions, you asked about Jinnah. Jinnah's vision was not that minorities in Pakistan should feel unsafe. It was the exact opposite. Jinnah's vision was not that we'll tell the Afghans to stay home. It was the exact, open the border. Any Muslim that is escaping war and poverty should have a home here, should have a meal here, should have a warm bed here. Now, what has happened instead? We've evolved into a weird Republican nightmare. I'm watching Pakistanis, Pakhtuns and Punjabis talking shit about Afghans as if we're so much better than them, as if our purpose isn't the safety and security and refuge of Muslims in this region. बिहारियों को निकालो, अफगानों को निकालो, इसको निकालो, उसको, क्या बातें कर रहे हैं भाई? You're not an Arizona or Texas Republican, man. You are who you are. But who's going to tell us that? Who's going to tell us who we are? Puri dunya mein, Shayan, the elite sets the benchmark for who you are.
They set the tone.
If they are too busy with their narrow family and organizational interests, they cannot serve the interests of the country. They cannot define a vision for the country, and the country will never be a G20 country. You'll not just beg India for peace today. When they attack, you'll beg them to start attacking. It's the natural consequence of giving up. This elite has given up. They've surrendered. But it's not to India that they've surrendered. They've surrendered to the overwhelming feeling of not knowing where to go because they don't have a GPS. They don't have a destination. And an elite that doesn't have a destination cannot have a GPS.
I'm not going to take up too much more of your time. I think you have to go to a dinner as well. So I just have one last question, and I'll leave it there. And that question is, I was thinking in all of this that you were talking about, and that's a whole other topic in itself. लेकिन आपने education पे भी बहुत सारा काम किया, अलिफ लाम, etc. Sometimes I think the problem, देखिए, our elite is at the end of the day, it's a representation of us, right? आप नहीं कह सकते we vote for X, Y, or Z. We accept the norm, not the person in Balochistan. आपकी बात सही है. Not the person in who's helpless, but I do. I play a part in this society. You play a part in this society, and we are also in a position where. So when I say education, I don't mean just like आपने O levels, A levels पढ़ लिया या metric पढ़ ली. I mean understanding deeper conversations, right? Do you think that you started podcasts, right? The Shahzad was telling me, a lot of people told me, you guys, Fasizaka, yourself, you started a podcast many years ago, and there's all these new mediums coming out. I'm not saying this is the answer.
We're the OGs.
You're the OGs. You're the absolute OGs, right? So I
take great pride in that.
Yes, I've narrowed it down to you guys. Everyone is like, these were the guys. These were the starters, right? But I'm not saying this is going to make a difference. I'm just asking you the question then, do you think that a part of the problem, or maybe the answer to the problem, is just एजुकेशन, राइट? मतलब पता ही नहीं है ना मसले हैं क्या. देखें, अगर आप एक बच्चे को बताओगे कि ये इंडिया विलन है, इसको जाके पत्थर फेंको मारो, या आप बताओगे कि यार आर्मी, सिर्फ आर्मी की गलती है, एक तासिम मुनीर को मार दो, वेर फ्री एंड क्लियर, या 100 बिलियन आ जाएंगे. A lot of this just comes from the fact कि आवाम भी तो सुन रही है ना. आप देखें, वो आर्मी जनरल भी कभी पाकिस्तानी ही है ना, इधर ही पढ़ा, इधर ही बड़ा हुआ, उसने रैंक से ऊपर गया. we're all the same. मतलब when we act like they and us are not the same, someone in rural Balochistan maybe can say that. I agree. I can't say that. I am part of that.
Exactly right.
I am part of the problem, right? And I think education is a part of the problem, where maybe even me, like I feel like I was not educated in the right way. I was not told. आप women's rights की बात कर रहे थे. How much have we have to unlearn, right? Not just अभी तो social, that's another podcast, right? Social issues and the problems we have in that, so on our social fabric, वो तो चलो अलग पूरी कहानी है. But how can this part change? And what are the steps that someone could take to change this exact issue that I mentioned, where I just feel like just a lack of knowledge?
Well, I mean, I think you're trying to do your bit.
Yeah.
And I think we all have to do a lot more. I have to do a lot more. I have to work harder. I have to work smarter. I have to be more effective. I have to get it right more than I get it wrong. And, I think we have to be relentless. If we're expecting change fast, I think we're now past the point where a few tweaks are going to get us back on track. I think we are looking at a long turnaround time now. And that, to me, is what scares me. If you're already telling me kids don't want to be Pakistani, 30 years ago, that was not the case.
Yeah.
Pakistanis were Pakistanis se zyada overconfident koi duniya mein entity thi.
No, even when we were young, like when I was a kid, when I was his age, 30, 40, 50, we were very proud of it. Pakistan meant and that was not long ago. I was a kid in the 90s, itna bhi time nahi guzra.
So you ask me, is there fifth generation warfare? Of course there is. But sometimes we fight it, we impose it on ourselves. And again, I would say, isme role, I think we should try. But ultimately, if the Pakistani elite doesn't decide to change course fundamentally, not change horses. इमरान खान अच्छा था, अब इमरान खान खराब हो गया, नवाज शरीफ अच्छा था, अब नवाज शरीफ खराब हो गया. ये like, I'm sorry, I was going to use a word, but I'm trying to keep it. This is not a national vision. This is a preference play. Like, it doesn't really matter who we like amongst the 4 or 5 key political actors, including the military. These are all preferences.
बिल्कुल.
You got to have a top of the pyramid, a clear, coherent view of what this place is going to be. And if you come very quickly to a major binary, then you're in the wrong conversation. So if you start with, लेकिन इस पे हमें फैसला करना होगा, हम Islamic या secular है, you're wasting time. Because actually that's really a personal preference play as well. A lot of the key binaries are just preferences. They're not actually real. The choice in Pakistan is not between Sweden and Afghan Taliban as a way of being. Broadly, the choice is this republic, versions of it, and there'll be some that's 19 and some that's 21, लेकिन आप ये 20 के इर्द गिर्द ही घूमेंगे. So सिर्फ आपने जो डिसाइड करना है वो ये कि आपने कितना बड़ा, कितना पावरफुल, कितना टेके वाला बनना है, और उसके लिए जो मुश्किल फैसले हैं वो करने को तैयार हैं. नहीं, बहुत सिंपल सी बात है. आपको अमीर लोगों से ज़्यादा पैसे लेने पड़ेंगे हर साल, रसूख वाले लोगों से ज़्यादा पैसे लेने पड़ेंगे. डिसीजन मेकिंग में सिविल सर्विस का जो कंप्लीट डोमिनेंस है और जो मार्केट से स्किल्ड लोग हैं उनकी एब्सेंस पब्लिक पॉलिसी में, उसको आपको सॉल्व करना होगा. और ये झूठे मूठे तरीक़ों से नहीं, ये फेक, अपने आप से झूठ नहीं बोल सकते. मैकेंजी को कंसल्टिंग कॉन्ट्रैक्ट देने से या मुझे कंसल्टिंग कॉन्ट्रैक्ट देने से, राइट? बिकॉज वी थिंक we're as good or better than them. But whether we're foreign or local, it doesn't matter. Actually, you need decision makers in positions of power that are competent to make those decisions. You need negotiators with Saudi Arabia that are competent, that have spent a lifetime negotiating financial deals. And if you don't make those decisions, you'll keep failing. So the choice is not for Shayan कि मैं कितनी podcasting करूँ. I don't want to give you the wrong. आप 100 करो या 10 लाख podcast episode कर लो, और आपकी viewership लाख हो या 50 लाख हो. The decisions I'm talking about are not going to come out of your podcast. Now, it may be that 30 years from now, somebody who's a dedicated viewer will make better decisions. But I don't think we have 30 years. I think there's great urgency. And by the way, one way or the other, time is the greatest healer, including of a broken spirit Pakistani elite. Pakistani elite की spirit break कर दी है हालात ने और उनकी अपनी हरकतों ने. लेकिन मैंने कहा ना, 70, 75, 80, 85. I mean, this generation is coming to its natural end.
Of course, yeah.
Now, what that transition looks like and when we make it is the decision. Saudi Arabia made that decision 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Actually, a lot of the decisions that MBS has made were benefited by decisions that King Abdullah made prior to King Salman taking over.
Yes.
And I've written about this. They actually do have a plan.
Yeah.
India has had a plan. You know, if you look at the Aadhaar stack and how they've made financial transactions so easy कि ठेले वाला भी जो है वो अपने मोबाइल फ़ोन से transaction जो है conduct कर रहा है, that has transformed the ability of women to have bank accounts. It's really been transformational for small and micro enterprises all over cities and villages in India. There was a long-term plan, and it predates Modi. Actually, it was Nandan Nilekani from Infosys, who's a Congress guy, who actually built the original stack, and they keep building on it. यहाँ पे एक बंदा आके build करता है, दूसरा बंदा आके उसको तोड़ के वही वाली 1.5 ईंट की मस्जिद फिर से खड़ी करता है. नमाज भी वही पढ़नी है, उसी स्टाइल से पढ़नी है, लेकिन इस वाली पे मेरा तख्ता होगा, वो पिछले वाले का तख्ता. सो वो continuity वाली बात. लेकिन ये सब क्यों हो रहा है? क्योंकि आपके incentives, मैं, मेरी फैमिली और मेरा इंस्टीट्यूशन, ये 3 चीज़ें आपकी incentives को स्ट्रक्चर कर रही हैं. तो इसमें वो जो ग्रैंड विजन है कि मेरा मुल्क और उसका मुस्तकबिल, वो नहीं है. तो ये फैसला जो है ये 70 साल के या इवन 55 साल के लोग नहीं कर सकते. ये नौजवानों को करना पड़ेगा. And I'm declaring, I'm telling you that I'm too old. Like, people in their 30s need to be decision makers in this country. That means, to answer your Civil Service Academy question, fine, choose them through a competitive process. But after 5 years, why shouldn't a 30-year-old be a secretary at the federal level if he's capable?
Merit-based,
Can anybody just explain why every secretary has to be 60, almost 60? Destroyed by Pakistan and the Pakistani system. Destroyed by the military, officers coming and getting them to do what they want. Destroyed by a politician manipulating them whatever way they want. Destroyed by inflation and their family, hating them for not taking rishwat. Or destroyed by the fact that they've been taking rishwat and they're feeling guilty about it. At 60, at 55, you're already over, man. The energy you need to run a division as a secretary, you have at 35. So make 35-year-old secretary. And it's not hard. You have to change the rules of business. But the Pakistan elite is not serious and has no vision, and so will not make the serious decision. So what will they do? Yaar, 25 logon ko OSD laga do. We're not serious.
No, I mean, sad part is I think there was a lot of actual optimism talking to you, which I really liked. And obviously there is the elephant in the room, which is the reality of our situation as well. But Khair, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun, and I hope you guys learned as much as I did. And thank you so much for being on the podcast.
I appreciate you having me, and I hope I didn't say anything to hurt anyone's feelings. And there is only room for optimism because we don't have another choice.
Yeah,
there's only one Pakistan.
And that's beautiful, right? I mean, we have to keep going. We can't lose hope now. Khair, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed our content, please do subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you for the next podcast.